very, very welcome here in Berlin at the Humboldt University. It's our greatest pleasure to have you here, and we are fond of your interest in this topic. We actually are surprised, and when I'm saying we, let me begin with introducing to you, I'm Christoph. I'm the one who is, how shall I say, the puppet on the string, who is doing the welcome and the official things. The real mastermind behind that is the guy who's standing over there. That is Robin. Robin is the guy who's in charge. Thank you very much. He's the organizer and I'm the spokesman. To be the spokesman here at this university, at which I'm working now for 24 years, is once again the most embarrassing thing you can imagine. I feel at least extremely embarrassed because I have to say a couple of housekeeping things, and then you will realize why I really feel badly to stand here. And actually, I wish that Robin would do this, because he then would be the messenger of the bad news. The good news is we can stay in this room and we'll have, as planned, we'll have our evening session here in this room. Bad news is it might be that the micros are switching off. They just did. And for that reason, something like 10 minutes ago, there was a kind of plan that we are moving around in this university, looking for another room, which would have taken something like an hour or so from us, because preparing the micros and what have you would have taken a long time. So the good news is we can stay here, and it seems as if the micro is working wonderful. Bad thing is, and here I'm coming with the housekeeping things before we are moving into the real topic, is that we are trying to use the micros. This is actually an event which is based, or thought to be, based on interaction. So we have wonderful presenters here on the panel, but they are not the main speakers. The main speakers are you, the audience. You are raising questions or comments or whatsoever, and then we want to have interaction. That is really meant to be. We have the enormous privilege to have as moderator, I'm not introducing the speakers, I'm leaving that to the moderator, and I'm just saying a word about the moderator. That is Ela Kagel, sitting in the middle of the panel. And I would be more than happy if you would be good enough to say a few words about your project, because that is what I find just fascinating. And I must say that when I'm reading what she's doing, that I'm sort of proud of being here in Berlin, because Berlin is a place where you have something like Ela Kagel, and that's what she's doing. So thank you very much for being here. And we begin with a few introductory remarks. You got a message for you by Florian Glatz, and he is, well, you talked about the Bundesblock yourself, and it's very nice that you are starting the entire thing. Thank you very much.
So yeah, thank you all for coming, and thank you for inviting me. I kind of self-invited myself, actually, I have to admit. So I want to do a quick introduction about blockchain and law, why I have been doing this for like 4 years now, and basically full-time, and it's extremely fascinating, and I think all of you made a really good choice to appear here, because if you consider to stay in this field, I think you will encounter some of the most fundamental questions regarding the role of law and how we want to structure and run our society that you could in your complete career. So congratulations on being here. I speak here in two functions. First, I'm the president of a new lobby group, you could say, that has established itself in Germany, in Berlin specifically. We're called the Blockchain Bundesverband. And and also there's Friederike Ernst. She's also part of the directors running this association. And The goal of this association is to promote blockchain-friendly legislation in Germany and also in Europe and in the whole world, you could say. And we're a pretty loosely organized group of people fascinated by blockchain, a lot of lawyers too. We're very more or less transparently organized. Basically everything we do happens in a big Slack channel. So all of you who know what Slack is, I encourage you to join and get engaged. It's open for everyone. And we have working groups on basically all the topics that relate to blockchain in some form, including law and many other kind of industry-specific applications. So go to bundesblock.de and check it out, and we'd be happy to welcome you in our community. And the second hat I'm wearing is the hat as a blockchain lawyer. I kind of came up with this term 4 years ago or something and bought the domain, and I think it was the best domain purchase in my life. I'm kind of number one on Google when you search for blockchain lawyer, and it's just because I randomly purchased this domain, not because I'm the most qualified person to talk about this. But anyways, now I stand here before you and you have to listen to me for 10 minutes. So I kind of want to give you an introduction, or I just want to give my personal opinion where I think we're headed with blockchain and law. And that can be very much criticized, which I guess you will do after I leave the stage. So regulation with regards to blockchain today, what is happening? And I want to contrast regulation on the one hand, and I want to contrast that to the ability for blockchain communities to self-regulate. Because I think this is kind of the most fundamental novelty of this whole technology, that it allows communities to create self-binding rules and govern themselves without the need to hire institutions by something like a state. So regulation today, what are governments doing in order to get a hold of this technology? And we see different approaches. Some US states like Vermont and Delaware have started to implement blockchain fundamentals into their legal system. So in Vermont, you will find a definition of what a smart contract is in their laws, right? And Delaware has done similar things. There are other countries joining that group of basically giving blockchain legal resemblance and legal characteristics in their systems. We have countries like Gibraltar, Malta, and even France, who are now starting to create real blockchain regulatory frameworks that will allow companies to become active in this space. So they focus mainly on legitimizing ICOs, so this new form of crowdfunding currently happening on the blockchain, and more future-oriented, I think, the concept of asset tokenization, meaning that in the future we might want to put equity stocks, company stocks on the blockchain, and all other kinds of assets as tokens on the blockchain infrastructure, and for that we need specific legislation, and that is currently happening in those countries. And then we have countries like Switzerland and Estonia who are actually going one step further, and they are trying to use blockchain for running public services. So the commercial registry where you register a company is currently put on the blockchain in Switzerland. Estonia has a long tradition of digital services, and they're now trying to integrate blockchain into that. So that's pretty interesting. And obviously, I guess all of you have read about the rather negative forms of regulation around blockchain happening in countries like China, happened in Russia, now they turned blockchain friendly, but until recently, Bitcoin was forbidden there. South Korea, other countries, they're kind of cracking down on this gray capital market developing on the blockchain. When we look at self-regulation, it's also quite interesting what's happening. We have databases like Messari, which is a new project that tries to establish standards and a huge registry for all ICOs happening on the planet. And it's a project driven by the blockchain community as a global phenomenon, trying to show to the regulators that basically they can tame down and kind of put this whole movement into a regulated field themselves. We have another interesting development, which is access to banking services. Okay, so if you're doing anything with blockchain today, you will probably have a hard time kind of finding this access to the old banking system, which, however, all of us need, or most of us need. If you're a company, you most probably need it. So because access to banking is so hard, lots and lots of blockchain companies start to regulate themselves in order to be able to hold a bank account, which is a huge problem today. And another interesting piece for me is interactive coin offerings, which is a new form of doing token distributions in ICOs, which basically allows investors to reach a more fair distribution of the tokens in an ecosystem. Okay, check that out if that's interesting to you. So this is what's happening today. Now I want to throw a quick glance at what we might see in the future. To me, I think law is withdrawing from society as a means to govern our behaviors and our interaction with one another. And instead, we see technology as the new dominant medium to formulate binding rules. Some really interesting scholar that all of you should check out, I think, his name is Roger Brownsword. He teaches at LSE, and he says we're going from prescription as a mechanism of governance to one of possibilities, meaning that you won't have a choice in the future whether you want to break a rule or not. It's the environment you're interacting with that is going to tell you what you are allowed to do and what not. And the blockchain currently, to me at least, seems to be the digital medium in which we formalize those rules, which will then be enforced by the technological environment that we're interacting with. But wait, did I say future? That's actually already happening. I think we're already seeing this happening. And for me, the best example is what you can call jurisdictional arbitrage. That is currently what's being done by companies in the blockchain space. Basically, I've been helping blockchain companies do ICOs and other crazy stuff for a couple of years now, and I'm seeing this live. And basically, when a company says, we want to raise funds, or we want to do this, all they say is, we want a jurisdiction that can be anywhere on the planet. We don't care. And all it needs is a blockchain-friendly, innovative financial markets regulator. It needs political stability. It needs low taxes. And you need to have access to banking. And if a jurisdiction fulfills those 4 requirements, the company won't care where it is. If it's on the Cayman Islands, or if it's in Hong Kong, or if it's somewhere in between, they won't care. And interestingly, that suffices for them, because they don't rely at all on any institutions in those legal systems where they incorporate themselves. All they need is a regulator that doesn't bother them about what they do. And code takes care of the rest. So you have a company that is raising $200 million in form of cryptocurrencies for building some crazy new technology out there. Investment contract, the assets, which formerly was equity, lock-up periods for investors, governance of their company and the network is all being done by code. So law really withers away and becomes a kind of baseline fallback mechanism for when things go completely wrong, but the rest is being done by code. And now I just want to mention 3 or 4 challenges that I foresee in this future if it should come true. And the first one, I think, is miners versus users. And by miners, I don't just mean the people in China currently mining blockchains, like mining bitcoins like crazy. I mean all those people that regulate right access to the blockchain, okay, which could be all kinds of different people. And those people basically divided up our blockchain future already among themselves. It's like, I just come from Davos at the World Economic Forum, and those people were there, and, oh, sorry, okay, 2 minutes. So I think that it is our challenge as lawyers to rebuild our democratically legitimized institutions that we kind of have today in this new blockchain future. And that needs to happen at the protocol layer. And I don't see anybody really doing this yet. So I would encourage you to follow that. And two remaining challenges, I think, is bridging the world in the blockchain with the world outside of the blockchain. So we call this the on-chain and the off-chain. I think it's a huge field of application for lawyers. And I think two last challenges is identity, okay? How can we represent ourselves on the blockchain? And lastly, I think technological reductionism is something that is really, really dangerous, that is currently sweeping over society, right? That we go from a legal system that we've built over centuries to a new system that basically has emerged within 10 years only, and really is lacking some really fundamental institutions that we have. So that's my contribution for tonight. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Florian, for all these challenging thoughts and issues you just raised. I was wondering if there are any immediate questions or feedback, comments on Florian's input. No? Okay. Well, if not, I'm sure we'll get back to a lot of the thoughts you have proposed. For now, I would suggest, before we start into the discussion, let's have a quick introduction. And I would like to ask each panelist to quickly introduce themselves by just saying their name, their field of activity, what they are doing. And also, I would like to hear your biggest challenges and your biggest hope for the year ahead, 2018. And Friederike, maybe we'll start with you.
Sure. Hi, I'm Friederike Ernst. I am the COO at Gnosis. I'm also the General Secretary of the Bundesblock that Florian is the president of. I come from a technological background. I'm a physicist by training. I've been in the cryptocurrency space a while. And as all companies, Gnosis is very actively engaging with the legal environment. We're very mindful of that. So basically for us, the biggest challenge for the year ahead is navigating the legal waters that the blockchain world is. And the biggest hope. There are so many cool things ahead for the next year. It's really hard to put this on a single hope. I think that blockchain is going to be so much more pervasive by the end of this year, and I really hope that we see the first couple of working apps on the Ethereum and other smart blockchains this year.
Okay, cool. My name is Sven Laepple. I'm CEO and founder of Stratum. We develop blockchain projects for our companies. We develop also our own projects. We are a so-called blockchain venture studio based here in Berlin. How did it happen that I got into blockchain? I was kind of, I'm working since 20 years in the digital innovation space, and I'm an entrepreneur, so I have always a curiosity which leads me to understand the new technological paradigms quite early. And so when Vitalik Buterin presented Ethereum in 2014 in Miami, I quickly understood how disruptive that project is. So I stopped doing any other project, refused to do so, and I got fully into the blockchain space. At the beginning, quite difficult because it's practical science, where you have some young guys like Vitalik coming up and developing platforms, running smart contracts without being a lawyer, without being an economist, and creating the rails on which our societies are going to probably work for the next decades. So that's how I came into. I tried hands-on to make first experiences, got into the MIT and the University of Nicosia to get a more framed approach to it, where I was able to join a small team at the computational law department at the MIT, whose aim was really to not talk anymore about smart contracts, but basically go all the route from having an idea to implementing it. And this was mind expanding and really great. So that's how I got into it. My hopes and my hopes are that this space is going to grow, as we have seen in the past. Somehow, for me personally, the year 2017 is also to a certain degree kind of a disillusion. Not because of the success, but because of its success. So it means I'm personally happy to see the tokens and the cryptocurrencies going up, to see the projects moving ahead, to see the adoption running. On the other hand, I see that the initial cultural driver behind what blockchain represents have been basically overtaken by a larger crowd who doesn't care about it. I just say Lambo, give me a Lambo, for those who understand it. So it's a quick, rich scheme, and the social aspects are basically moving in the background. That's what I'm a bit sorry about, and my hope would be that we find somehow a way to take over responsibility in keeping those social aspects upfront and living. Yeah.
I'm also taking the opportunity to quickly introduce myself. My name is Ela Kagel. I'm working as a digital strategist, and I'm co-founder of Supermarkt. Supermarkt is both a platform and a space here in Berlin. And what we do is we try to open up spaces for digital culture and alternative economies. So our interest is not just on blockchain, but on all forms of collaborative practices around economies, whether it's community value, regional currencies, and so on. And my biggest challenge for this year is to really being able to still wrap my head around what's going on out there, to really follow up on all those latest developments, because sometimes I'm totally overwhelmed of what's going on, and I find it difficult to really find a position and to really understand what's going on, and to be able to take the right next steps, let's say. And my hope is that with Supermarkt we will just continue to provide a space for reflection and exchange, because I think it's extremely valuable, especially with regards to what Sven was just pointing out, that I really have the hope that this entire discussion doesn't just lead us into the next marketplace or market opportunity, but also into a reflection on what blockchain actually means for society, and that's also what we are trying to discuss tonight.
Okay, hi, my name is Shermin Voshmgir. I'm the founder of the Blockchain Hub here in Berlin, and we started a few years ago. The aim was to educate and advocate blockchain and smart contracts and the future of the web to a general public, and to discuss this in a multi-stakeholder fashion with all stakeholders of society. And we had great working groups, one of them blockchain and law. This is how I met Nina, and actually Florian was also part of it, and somehow the Bundesblock came out of it. So our aim, we understood very early that blockchain is kind of an operating system for the next generation society. And we wanted to educate people early enough, because, as you said, Sven, there are people building these protocols who are very young, very ambitious, but they're not lawyers, and they're not economists, and these protocols are here to stay. They're not going away, so we better do it right. Yes, my other function starting next week, we got funding for a research institute for cryptoeconomics at the Vienna University of Economics. So I will be the director of that research institute starting next week. So I will be between Vienna and Berlin. And one of our research areas is going to be the intersection of blockchain and law. So if anyone is interested, I'll be happy to connect you with our researchers there. And my hopes for this year, I'm quite certain that this bubble will burst, not because the technology is fake, but because the hype cycle eventually vanishes, and at that moment people won't talk about getting rich fast anymore, and we can get back to business. So I think we just have to manage through this crazy phase now. And continue to do advocacy. I think last year was probably the year of ICOs. This year will probably be the year of putting real-life assets, tokenizing the rest of the world, and we're already seeing it. We are seeing that Venezuela is announcing a petro token. It's basically an asset-backed token, and other countries are announcing their own cryptocurrencies. So I think that will be very interesting. And companies are starting, like Kodak, to start their own cryptocurrency. It's vague still, but this will be very interesting. Yeah.
My name is Nina Siedler. I'm a partner with DWF, an international law firm. We actually opened the Berlin office for DWF just in April last year, and built up to now a group of about 10 lawyers, mainly really purely working on crypto cases. So that maybe already stresses or highlights again what Florian already mentioned. It's a very interesting area, and it doesn't focus on a specific part of law. I'm by background a finance lawyer, but I wrote my PhD in regarding the distribution of powers. So I'm very much interested in the governance topics that strongly relate to blockchains. But we have also other colleagues in corporate, in real estate, in IPT, data protection, e-commerce, all sorts of legal aspects that become relevant in that area. So I think it's a very interesting time. It's an exciting time to build new topics, and I completely agree that we need to actually bring that topic further into society and take away the fears that are combined with the topic of digitalization as such, especially in Germany, interestingly, and yeah, to integrate more people into the tokenized world that is surely coming up. And maybe one further remark, I always like to say we lawyers, we are something like an early indicator for what's going on, because we see new things coming up when they are still in stealth mode, but at a point of time where the founders or the ones, the project people actually decided to put money into this because they need to pay us. And I can only confirm, you know, we are fully booked, right? So we have so many projects on the table. There will certainly something, sincerely move into the token economy during 2018.
Yeah, thanks everyone for your contributions. If we look at this very fresh new year, 2018, one of the most repeated predictions about what we are going to see in this year related to blockchain is that we will see more and more applications that are directly linked to society, and that eventually the blockchain will become mainstream. For me, that seems to be a little bit too early, to be honest, and I'm not entirely sure about that, because if I look around at Facebook to get an understanding of what people think about Facebook and what the state of knowledge about blockchain and what the state of knowledge is, then I see a lot of jokes and irony going on of people generally admitting that they have no idea what we are talking about here. And you know, there is this joke like, no, I'm not doing blockchain. I already have a Facebook and Instagram account. That's enough. So I think in a way that's quite typical for the state of knowledge or the state of education around blockchain. So I really wonder if we are to see blockchain technologies moving into the mainstream world, into our society. I really wonder whether you could just give us some concrete examples of where you think we will see blockchain applications in the coming months that will really change the lives of regular people? Do you have any examples for us?
Like to start by a project that was recently launched. It's the Ocean Protocol, and it solves a big problem. These guys are here in Berlin, actually. It's a Berlin-based startup, and they are solving the problem of data provenance. So in this data-driven world that we live, like all our data online, we don't own our data anymore. And basically what they're doing is using blockchain technology to bring ownership and control of our data back to us. So in the future, using blockchain, using maybe this particular blockchain protocol, we will be able to track if Facebook sold our private data to another company, and if yes, we can consent or not consent, and by tokenizing it, we will possibly be even able to earn together with Facebook a fair share of their advertising revenues that was generated through the data, our data that they sold. That is a very cool application.
Can I ask, does it work? Yeah, it does. Can I ask a question in this context? I hear now from you with highest interest that you're saying they are working on something to bring property back to us. And how do you relate that? That is not yet my question. My question is, how do you relate that to what Florian said, that law is disappearing and will be replaced by a code? How does this correlate?
I'm not quite sure. I wouldn't confirm that. I don't think Florian said that, that code is law. What I understood is that code is law as long as people agree. And once they disagree, we have to fall back to, our legal institutions. So I don't believe that code is law. I think the power of blockchain is that we have auto-enforceable code. That's the actual revolution. So we can codify something, automatically enforce it, and by that we radically reduce the transaction costs. We reduce bureaucracy in every way, shape, and form, and we can focus on new cool things. And we do, however, need to find solutions for dispute settlement. This issue has not been sufficiently tackled yet. So your researchers, your lawyers, that is a very interesting field, dispute settlement in the distributed world. How can that work? Code can never be law. So one of the biggest questions, I think, is governance. So we have inbuilt governance mechanisms in the blockchain protocols and also on the smart contract layer, but this cannot be we need off-chain governance mechanisms as well. Yeah.
Any more examples, ideas on concrete societal applications of blockchain?
Yes, of course. So there are many points I'd like to address here. Maybe first the easy one. I do not expect people that they need to understand blockchain to use it. The mass adoption will not require this. You don't need to understand how a combustion engine works to be able to drive a car. So I think at the end, whatever will bring people to use it are services which improve their lives somehow by providing it on a higher quality or cheaper. One example how this could happen is the mobile app Status, one of the projects being built on the Ethereum blockchain, and I think they are going also to be in your new office soon. So this is a project which comes with the flavor of being just an instant messenger with a higher level of security, but at the end it's an interface to smart contracts and to all the dApps. Is mobile enabled, and for example what banks do not at all understand is that this is not an app which you download basically on your mobile device, because we have in the background behind that blockchain a cultural movement which expresses itself in technology, a P2P infrastructure which is being built. So, and that project raised in one of those ICOs in 2017 over 100 millions euro, dollars, whatever, in a very short time frame. So they have much more money that they need to basically build that system technically. So they have a lot of money to make nice marketing. And each person who downloads it becomes a member of that network. If you look at the diffusion of innovation on a global scale is happening at a rate which we have never seen in the past. A download of 200 million apps on a global scale is not unrealistic in 6 months or 12 months. So if such a scenario could happen, if, of course, there are some ifs, like the scalability and transaction rates of the underlying network. But if we assume that a download in this size can happen, then we would have an entire independent financial network without any banks being involved, which is a big deal because it's also a global network. So this is for me one of the contenders with a big potential impact, and they are already very nice, making, you know, progress on a constant pace since a while. Yeah. So, and then I had also, you were triggering a lot of interesting points, but you know, it's not easy to remember what you want to say and then talk at the same time. So.
Maybe something very practical. I believe that in the energy space, we will see quite quickly the first, you know, usable apps for everyone. Like, you know, the startup, forgot the name, who is building those charging things for electric cars, to be paid on the blockchain. It's an energy spin-off, I believe, Motion or something. And then there are a lot of projects in the energy space, because energy is basically perfect for digitalization. It's digital as such. So I believe we will see a lot of things there, also together with these tenant sharing projects where there is a solar plant on the rooftop, and then the excess energy is shared within the direct neighborhood, things like that.
I am mostly excited for two things. One of them being decentralized autonomous organizations, truly decentralized ways of governing any structure, really. It can be modified to govern any sort of structure, depending on the use case. And the other thing is fairly practical. It's stablecoins. So many fintech applications have actually been hampered by the fact that the money that we use, the coins, they are fairly volatile in price. So if you want to insure something, if you want to hedge against something, you always have to price in the volatility of the asset you're actually insuring yourself in. So basically, if you're insuring yourself and the asset drops by 80%, which can happen, that kind of avoids your insurance in a way. So basically, stablecoins are a way of transporting the stability we are used to in fiat currencies, or in the fiat currencies we are luckily dealing with, to the blockchain. And that is going to put many fintech applications into the next gear.
Thank you. I see a hand going up at the back.
Hello, my name is Lucas. Actually directs exactly into the last two things that have been said, towards the use cases possible from first the energy sector and from the real estate sector, which I'm working in. Where over the last, let's say, 1.5 to 2 years, I've been talking to a lot of different people wanting to implement different use cases, like share and charge from the spin-off from Energy, for example. And since we kind of want to incorporate different services on a district level, we need to tackle the problem of interoperability. Although when you come down and start to talk to the legal departments of the respective companies and the respective projects, it always kind of narrows down to this topic of governance, and somehow, and especially then, which I personally think is a very nice topic of transforming our system right now, of decentralized governance or self-governance and kind of empowerment on a legal basement. Would you be able or willing to give a judgment whether you think that Ethereum is going to be able to give the technological framework for that, or if you would say that one of the third generation blockchains, which right now kind of are saying to address some of these issues, but we do not know which one will actually meet those from a legal perspective.
I have a question. What do you mean with governance? Do you mean governance on a blockchain level or a smart contract level? Because that's two different things.
First of all, governance in a way of forming contractual, societal contracts, like in a decentralized autonomous organization, but having to be able to have flexibility inside these contracts or inside these compounds of contracts.
So basically, if you design a smart contract on Ethereum, you can design the governance rules as you like. So, I think the trickiest part about this, we talked about it today, is like token design, application token design is really something that has not been researched yet, and we're learning by doing. We've had the first ICOs for the last 2 years, application token ICOs, and it's questionable whether a lot of these ICOs will survive. Why? Because they have, many of them have poor token design and governance mechanisms in that token design in a way that they might not be sustainable enough for their own purpose in the environment they're running, and that they might not have good governance mechanisms. So this question is actually unresolved, and on a smart contract level it's completely or almost completely independent from what the Ethereum network or how the Ethereum network governance system looks like. That's a big field of research, like sustainable application token design that is, and when I say sustainable, it means that it's kind of not easy to game the system of this distributed network or this decentralized autonomous organization, ideally, and that you can upgrade the design mechanisms when the conditions change. And we really have little use cases and examples of how to do it and how to do it right. So I think the next 5 years will be very interesting. It will be a trial and error period of figuring these things out, because we just really don't know how to do it right.
So I understand you correctly that application governance is possible on the blockchain implementation, even on Ethereum right now, and other governance mechanism, more from a legal perspective, will be done off-chain mostly.
So when we talk about a decentralized autonomous organization as a smart contract running on a blockchain like Ethereum, then you can basically code your governance rules into or design them into your code, so you're in full control of how you want to do it. The problem is not that we can technically do it, but the question is, what do you want to do? And I think the biggest challenge right now is that blockchain is actually not a technological revolution only, it's a socio-economic revolution. We're moving from a world where we had top-down structures of pyramids or organizations that are look like a pyramid. They have a legal entity, they have legal contracts between their stakeholders, and And now we're moving into a distributed world where you don't have one central legal entity, and code is law in a limited sense. And the question is, how do you design the mechanism of that code so it's fault tolerant and collusion resistant and it's persistent over time? And that is a whole new thing, and we have to figure out how to do it. Yeah.
And maybe to add that, we do not have a legal entity reflecting the idea of the DAO yet. I mean, that's something that we all must admit. I always keep saying, in my view, you know, the DAO is basically a civil law partnership, BGB-Gesellschaft, which leads to an unlimited liability of any of its members, which obviously is not a great thing in this context. From the UK and the US perspective, they would call it an incorporated entity, which basically has the same legal effects. And I think that's in all established jurisdictions across the globe. That's simply what happens when you do it like this. But at least in the, what is it, Sondierungsgespräche? No idea what that is in English. We found a sentence saying that the new coalition wants to look into the digitalization of our corporate laws. And that's why tomorrow there will be a call within the corporate law working group of the Bundesblock to see if we can come up with some ideas. And although we think we should maybe start with simple things like commercial registry on the blockchain, stuff like that, we might even add the idea to actually establish an entity which is organized more or less like a civil law partnership, but provides for limitation, liability, provides for limited liability of all of its members. Right, so a little bit compared to the German Verein, because that's, so something in between that could help navigate through these new ideas, because I'm sure, you know, the DAO will continue, and we need to help the people to actually set it up in a proper way.
I was just thinking maybe it could be useful to draw a larger perspective on the term governance and what it actually means, and also what we still need to learn in order to apply those new mechanisms in governance that the blockchain is actually proposing. So I see a friction between the attempts of governmental system to trying to control blockchain and trying to control cryptocurrency markets. And on the other hand, this idea of being a member of a self-regulatory community and applying own rules of governance. So I wonder, are we ready yet from a larger perspective of society to really dive into that, into this new governance system, or is there anything specific we still need to learn in order to be able to really to play this game?
Oh, I'm sure there are many things we actually have to learn, but I think this is one of the things you best learn by trial and error. So there's no use in, there's limited use in having good theories if you don't put them to the test, right? So some of the brightest minds are actually thinking about how to best structure a DAO and which provisions to put in and what would actually be desirable qualities of a DAO. So should everyone get the same say? I mean, basically the attention of a group, the bandwidth, it's a limited bandwidth, right? So how do you actually compete for attention? Should everyone get the same say? Should everyone get one vote? Can you delegate your votes to someone who knows better than you? I mean, there are many, many concepts that are actually up in the air, and a lot of people are thinking about them, and I think in the end we just have to try many of them and see whatever works, and then mix and match and do that again.
So I see that the topic of governance is related to blockchain being experimented in a nice way by another project called Aragon. and I'm happy that they are not driven by lawyers, but they are utopists, and this is something I love a lot in that space. You have a lot of utopists which are competing in a positive, constructive way with the realists. So many lawyers who we see today here are primarily focused in ensuring that these projects happen in a legal framework. And I'm also happy about this because I'm an entrepreneur. On the other hand, I love to see those young dudes who are creating those platforms, just running away and just creating and developing the next thing, the next solution, to escape that regulatory reach. And so that's why I love the privacy projects, the anonymity projects, and who try to escape basically that desire from the society to regulate blockchain. And I think, because we haven't talked about this, but blockchain is not only a great opportunity for us to basically redistribute wealth or power and decentralized existing structure, but it is unfortunately, it has also a weak point, the immutability of the ledger and the power of the smart contracts to automate processes, to empower also centralized societies or organizations to basically and possibly harm you. So one of these projects is, of course, it's not even blockchain based, but you see that that would make a lot of sense. It's happening in Asia, where you have not the same understanding of the individual rights like we have them a lot in Europe, and where you have your potential credit rating, and this affects a lot your behavior, everyday behavior, being basically managed by the accumulation of your interaction on digital platforms, and then basically mapping your social behavior if it belongs to what they expect you to do, and this impacts the interest rate. So I see that, yes, there's a desire, a need, a necessity to regulate that space. On the other hand, I see that I'm very glad that there are some young dudes who are basically running ahead again to try to escape this, because this is probably, in my point of view, going to be very important for us on an individual level, but also on a society level, to keep our level of freedom we have here as individuals and as a society in a world which is turning the other way around, right?
I would maybe like to point out that when we talk about governance, there are two layers. One is that nation states trying to regulate blockchain, which really is a huge challenge, because how do you regulate a peer-to-peer network of actors that does not have a central entity? And blockchain basically brings the next step of the dismantling of the nation state, in my opinion. We've already seen it in the 80s, like with free trade, companies had the freedom all of a sudden to choose their jurisdiction. With the internet, we've had like e-commerce and the freedom of information flow. So one of the biggest challenges that the regulators are facing today is they have to regulate a world that they cannot regulate anymore. So I think, as for if anyone is a Staatswissenschaftler here, I think the greatest challenge is to redefine the role of the nation state in the 21st century. I think the nation state has to redefine itself to become an enabler for the digital transformation that has already happened, actually, but it hasn't happened in law to sufficient extent, I would say. So what Nina just said about creating a legal entity that could reflect the necessities of a decentralized autonomous organization that crosses national jurisdictions would be actually such a thing. But I think that centralized entities can less and less regulate. And I think we will more and more have self-regulation through code of these distributed networks. And yeah, of course.
Thank you very much. What means self-regulation? What my concern, I'm an old guy, I mean, no need to point that out. What I'm afraid of the entire thing is the situation that China is going to confront. At what they're introducing, the entire control of the people and the steering, the governance of the people and I think, Sven, you were pointing at that implicitly at least, that is what frightens me like hell. And that is really what, you know what I mean?
Yes, I mean, you're referring to the citizen scorecard and to enforcing the laws.
Exactly,
yes.
and once again, that is really frightening me like hell. And now you are saying, behind all these utterances which I heard from you, I hear the idealistic, for me very sympathetic, allusions to freedom. We get decentralized, we get out of the national state, and we make much more self-control. That sounds to me, I'm a late 68er, I can't translate this. It sounds perfect to me. But I see at the same time, as Sven pointed out, I see developments running around using the modern technology to suppress the people in a way which I have recognized myself, only experienced for 4 days when I was in North Korea. I mean, that is a way where I certainly don't want to live. How do you make that true?
Yes, I think that's a very important point. So blockchain is a very powerful tool. We can use it as a freedom machine, but we can equally use it as a control machine. So I think what was pointed out by Florian in the beginning is that we actually need to redefine the values and the mechanisms that we have fostered for our modern democracies and translate those to a distributed world. And what does that mean? Because we cannot hope that this technology will go away and globalization never happened and the internet never happened, right? But how do we translate the values of a democratic free society to a distributed network? And that cannot so there are a few, I mean, you mentioned Aragon, there is also BitNation. They're kind of creating a WordPress for creating your own jurisdiction. I think the future will be distributed network of, in the future, if I fast forward in my mind, we will be citizens and consumers, that term will be merging probably, of different blockchains or different decentralized autonomous organizations, all with different purposes. And the more mobility we have, the less it will, a centralized nation state will have the ability to actually enforce the law on their national citizens. And we haven't even talked about virtual reality yet. And this thing is happening also. So I think
apologies. Short interruption.
Yes.
Will you please forgive me? First of all, I mean these assets in virtual reality. A doctorate student of mine, something like 10 years ago, has written a wonderful dissertation about property in Second Life, which was a fascinating piece, and that's exactly this issue. No, what I'm concerned of is you're saying we, and I trust you because I hear you, I see you, and everything is wonderful. But how do you make sure that the we you are referring to are those people who are like-minded like you? And how do you make sure that not someone... We are here in Berlin. I heard some people saying, talking about Turkey, a little bit dictatorship is nice. Maybe it's helpful. And how do you exclude those from the we you are referring to?
I think we have to, we cannot exclude. First of all, for me, a democracy is a society of freedom of expression, so I have to accept the fact that somebody else has different ideas. And we really face the challenge that we're trying to, it's hard to tell. I really don't know how to, so this technology can be used also to oppress us. So I think we need, the only way to protect us is to educate the people what this technology means, all about the positive potentials as well as the negative potentials, so we can be part of designing those tools together. That's the only way to make sure that it goes in the direction that we want, we being me and my friends and the people around me, right? And I think this is not happening enough, and I fear that in a country like Germany, I can't say it enough, where we're still not teaching children how to code in kindergarten. We have a problem, it's 2017. So 18, yes.
Yeah, and governance, no? Shermin, that's the issue about governance, right? We need to put governance systems in place which ensure that indeed, you know, nobody can simply take it over and suppress the others, but to keep it open-minded. And that was one of my criticisms early stage with Ethereum, for example, that there's a lot of talk about democracy, but look at it, it's not democracy which is ruling there, it's a plutocracy, right? And that's something that needs to be discussed more in further details. And then we see a development also to blockchains which are neither private ones, permissioned, nor permissionless public ones, but something in between. And I think that's a great area where we can play a little bit around with those governance features and can try to experiment and come up with systems that ultimately work.
Can I add something? I think you just wanted to change the boundaries. Sorry.
Can I ask a question or maybe broach another subject? I've been, in a way, discussing this since 2015 with some friends with Ethereum, and they told me early on they're going to abolish lawyers. And I thought that's great, then I can find a decent job. I realized in the meantime that's probably not going to happen, because all of this technology is going to be used by humans, and humans fight, they have conflicts, they misunderstand each other. And my understanding is that no blockchain technology whatsoever will ever do away with conflict or bad intentions. I'm not even talking about fraud, misunderstandings, which is great for lawyers, because there will be, and lawyers are not complicating things, but they're looking to prevent conflicts. And my understanding is this great technology will not prevent human conflict. So deal with that. And maybe you will not even have a consensus for a new self-governing system. So we still have to talk to each other, right?
So I really think that blockchain can reduce bureaucracy of the law much more than abolish lawyers, yes. And lawyers of the future will need to code, but we will not abolish the necessity of a legal system. And so there will be a shift, but not an abolishment, yes.
Yeah, maybe just to pick up, Tom, your question, I think this is an interesting point. Indeed, it started first that smart contracts make lawyers obsolete. And actually what we see is that, no, we are quite happy that you are there and that we found some knowledgeable ones to help us in making those new systems. But if you look at the at many fields, you see that some activities of some lawyers are just going to be not necessary anymore. And on the other hand, there's a shift to new topics where lawyers are going to be needed, and where, unfortunately, only a few lawyers today understand and embrace that new technological shift. And I think what we also see more and more is that maybe also the nature of the lawyer in his activity is going to change. I expect the lawyer possibly to, as a profession, to take a more entrepreneurial role. Some embrace it, and some are just looking for it to happen, because when you see that the potential of smart contracts, then I could expect the lawyers moving forward and creating some services based on these new technologies to deliver some some benefit to the individuals in society.
Yeah, first of all, let me apologize, I'm not a lawyer, so maybe some unorthodox imagination. Yes, okay. So what I was thinking is, first of all, I'm really fascinated by this thought that in the future we might opt into different governance options. And what I was thinking could be the role of lawyers would be like maybe voluntary certification. You know, that so maybe we have certain blockchains which are actually mediated by lawyers, or where the option is there for off-chain dispute settlement by lawyers. What do you think about this option, that certain blockchains give people the option of actually consulting lawyers and others don't? Is that something acceptable from the point of view of a lawyer, or is that?
Well, what basically blockchain and smart contracts allow you to do is to create any kind of jurisdiction that you want, and then people can opt into that jurisdiction and be part of it. And I think that's really a very interesting aspect. However, I think that this old discussion that the legal scholars have between the rule of law and the spirit of the law also prevails in blockchain, and we could see it with the block size debate in Bitcoin, but especially when the DAO hack happened and there was a discussion of a Ethereum fork. It was the rule of code versus the spirit of the code. And so these discussions will all prevail, but they will be, we will be having these discussions on multiple blockchains or in multiple smart contract layers, and we might have an attention problem in the future if we're like citizen consumers of so many different distributed networks where we have to make decisions of how we want to participate. So I think the participation challenge will really be one of the greatest challenges. For example, in the DAO, when the hack happened and the DAO token holders could decide how to there was a limited framework of deciding how to take action against what happened. It was really hard. There was a minimum quorum of 20%, and it was impossible to get 20% of the token holders to cast a vote. So we had to lower it to 10%. These are actual problems that nobody foresaw. Or very few people probably foresaw. They foresaw it, so this is probably why the minimum quorum was 20%. They didn't realize that that is too little. And I would like to stress the fact what Nina told us before. When we talk about jurisdictions and legal systems, one of the greatest challenges that I see right now is all the state-of-the-art blockchain protocols that we have. They're not democratic, they're plutocratic. So more money buys more decision power in the network. And this is one of the greatest threats that I see for our society, because this space is moving fast, and these operating systems are becoming state-of-the-art, and we're creating capitalism on steroids, and I'm not quite sure if we want to do that.
On that same note, so Ethereum was presented in 2014 as an idea, and a lot of the premises that were presented in 2014, including the DAO, we've seen were not really accurate. And one of the things that we figured out is Vitalik may be a great coder, but he doesn't really know anything about social psychology, and he doesn't really know much about economics. So where do we go concerning diffusing this idea that Vitalik knows everything, and that maybe the idea that we need to decentralize everything is a flawed premise, especially concerning when you're pointing out that the DAO was decentralized and they could not get enough people to vote to get consensus, and basically pushed it back into a plutocracy. So this is where the premise that decentralization works for everything is based on the Byzantine general fault problem. Well, now we know there's 6,000 years of decentralized history in China that was not acknowledged in that problem. So again, when we're talking about decentralization, are we working with the flawed premise that everything needs to be decentralized?
No, I don't think so. Actually, that's something that needs to be also discussed. What we currently see is the building of a lot of decentralized applications on a decentralized network, but which are provided by a central provider, right? That's the reality that I currently see. I don't see, and you know, that's the vision where you want to go is actually to go away with that. But yeah, I think that's a very valid discussion. And regarding jurisdictions, I always stress, you know, we don't want to centralize jurisdictions too much, right? The choice of jurisdictions we have across the globe is a good thing and nothing to fight against, right? We maybe have too many, but in general speaking, that the legal system is decentralized currently is rather a good thing than a bad thing, in my opinion. You know, one global jurisdiction, I think, is a terrible idea.
Yeah, jurisdictional monopoly is not a good idea. But to get back to your question of centralization, so first of all, how decentralized? There is a gradient between centralized and decentralized. So I think we need to talk more, be more specific when we talk about the Grad der Dezentralisierung. Yeah? And second of all, I don't think that, I think distributed is more the premise than decentralized. We won't, I think we will always have points of centralization. Like, apart from the fact that Bitcoin mining is much more centralized, it's an oligopoly right now and not democracy, is a fact. And this is a governance issue. And then the other question is centralization around knowledge and attention. So I think there is a lot of centralization now is around the people who understand the code. Because in the end, even if I can decide over a hard fork yes or no, if I don't fully understand on a deep technical level the implications of a code upgrade, I will always have to trust the people who have that knowledge. And right now, in order to understand a code upgrade, you need to be a physicist or a mathematician. Like a simple informatica won't even understand the intricacies of a code upgrade, of a blockchain protocol. And if we make the math of how many people in the world have a PhD in physics or in math who have the potential to understand it, I think we, in the blockchain world, we live in a much more centralized world than in the world now. And the storytelling is rather balloons, but it's not quite the reality. Yeah.
Maybe at this point we can expand a little. I see you. You'll be able to ask your question in a second. I just have a proposal in between, because I think it would be interesting to expand the discussion a little bit to state governance as well. And I think everyone is really interested in the advocacy work that you are doing with the Bundesblock. And if we look at other cities in Europe, I recently found that Barcelona has a CTO, a Chief Technical Officer, Francesca Bria. And I found that a very interesting move. So if you would compare that to Berlin or, let's say, government in Germany, what kind of political positions or stakeholders would you like to see in the future in order to really be able to create a sustainable framework around blockchain technologies here in Germany? What is missing, and what do you hope to achieve with your work?
I'd actually have to say that before I got into that, I would have been way more pessimistic than I am now. So it actually seems that the administration, it's easy to find people to talk to blockchain about. People, they are interested, they want to hear, they want to understand, they want to be explained what's happening. They are willing to incorporate things. They don't want to they don't want to do that ad hoc, and that's for good reason. I mean, you don't want to fly under the radar, you don't want to be unregulated, but equally, you don't want to be badly regulated. That's probably even worse. So I would have to say that the openness to discussion is something that really amazed me. And I know that's something unexpected to say because people usually like saying bad things about politicians and politics and the administration in general. But we have actually found them to be very open and very open to dialogue. So I'm happy to hear that Barcelona has a CTO. Often it would be nicer to have more people with a tech background in political institutions. But I'd have to say it's that this is a minor complaint. So, I mean, obviously some things are easier to explain if you have a techie in front of you. But I would like to think that we rise up to the challenge and we try to make ourselves heard. So, yeah.
But I think the pace with which the politics and our administration is actually picking up and reacting up on those talks, that's too slow, to be honest. One reason for us to forming the Bundesblock was that we already experienced last year that openness. And a lot of us were talking to a lot of people, but nothing happened. And that was one goal of actually forming that group, to actually make us move in Germany.
I would like to, I had the same experience like you now in the Bundesblock last year when I was talking to a lot of politicians. They were very open. They didn't want to over-regulate. They wanted to understand before they regulate, and they wanted to actually support the community. However, I felt that they were quite, let's say, lame in action. Doors were open, and minds were open, but lame in action. And I found because a lot of them did not understand technology sufficiently to understand what is really happening and how urgent certain matters really are. And I've had quite a different experience in Austria, where I managed to raise funds for this research institute. And why? I would say also very much driven by the fact that the minister actually has a tech background. So he understands it, and he understands the urgency, and he gave a lot of not only funding for that particular institution, but he opened a lot of funds for research grants. So in the future, even though he's gone now, people will be able to do some applied research on that technology. So having more people in government who understand technology on a deep level really makes a difference, and you can also see it in Estonia, where when you have a cryptographer as a president, it makes a difference.
And we had not been able to raise that funds here in Berlin or Germany for Shermin. That's maybe something to add, right? We tried for 1.5 years to get something, what Vienna is doing now here in Berlin done.
My question goes a little bit in a similar direction. You've been talking about the challenges of, oh, I have to step, I'm sorry. About the challenges of protocol design and how to do it right and how to do the governance mechanisms right. And I don't know, I'm somewhat surprised that nobody has brought up that it's not the first time that we have had a distributed digital network system, and that have been thinking about how to put values or how to put norms into digital protocols. I mean, we've had the internet, and we've also seen forms of governance develop for the internet and bodies of governance. So I'd be interested in your assessment in how far this whole blockchain development scenery could either directly tie in with internet governance institutions. I'm, for instance, thinking of bodies like the Internet Engineering Task Force. I know there's Interledger. The Interledger group has been showing up there and presenting their ideas about protocol design of inter-token exchanges, if you will. So either directly tie in or take those institutions as role models and see where we could learn something from this sort of self-governance, but not fully self-governance, the multi-stakeholder model that it entails, because we're surely not there that we don't have the states. We're surely also not in a situation that the states will soon be gone. Instead, it's going to be very much a mix of well, governance bodies, let's say. So that's my question. How do you see that relationship between internet governance and blockchain governance? Or take internet governance as inspiration, in which fields not?
Maybe then Friederike, you can help me, but I think what's important to understand here, it's a good analogy, but it's not sufficient because the internet protocol is like a thin protocol, right? And the blockchain protocol is a fat protocol with a lot of stakeholders that are governed by the code. It's hard to compare those two. You have inbuilt governance in the code. Like internet governance was about sending data packages from one point to the other. So we need a complete new definition of governance systems. And yes, the governance is in the code, and when it comes to standardization, the standardization happens already in the code. Now, when it comes to asset transfer and standardization, here we're starting to have the first protocols like the Web3 Foundation, the Polkadot, etc., Cosmos. They're already working on cross-chain standards. It just works differently this time around. Yeah.
So basically, the internet governance bodies, they were mostly about standardization. They didn't actually have an economic interest, and this is completely not the case for the DAOs and the DACs, the decentralized autonomous companies that we are now talking about. Those are basically, they are entities that are not working under the not-for-profit banner that the typical internet things are. I mean, they're regulating. You're shaking your head, but basically the ICANNs and they're all they're very much a bunch of people who like setting standards and norms, and this is so basically as soon as you mix that up with economic incentives that don't always align, you actually need really meaty mechanisms to actually prevent bad things from happening. So you were saying the DAO had this rule that 20% of people actually need to decide on which projects to fund in order for that to happen. And there were a lot of projects actually competing for bandwidth, and obviously you have to find a mechanism of toning that down, or of making it pricey to have bandwidth, or expensive if people don't like you. So basically, it's a whole Pandora's box, and I believe that many things can be built in this really exciting new field of mechanism design and self-enforcing mechanism design. But it's so sure, of course, we can lean on some things that already exist, but I really don't think that that's sufficient.
Maybe I was unclear. I tried to. So the internet 1.0 was just sending like data packages from like unintelligent data packages from A to B. It didn't have data logic, inbuilt data logic. Because of that, first and foremost, we needed the standardization bodies. Blockchain doesn't need this type of standardization body because the standard is already in the code. However, now we do need off-chain governance. So we do need smarter off-chain governance, and we have newer blockchains like, okay, maybe that's now a bad example, the Tezos people, Tezos, etc., who have been trying to, or are trying to experiment with blockchains who have, with new types of protocols where you have new types of more flexible governance mechanisms. A big discussion right now is how to distribute on-chain and off-chain governance. Standardization bodies will not be necessary anymore, however. So what was mixed up in the Web 1 and the Web 2, having an institution that is a standardization body and as well as governance institution, internet governance institution, this is decoupled in the Web 3. The standard is in the code, and the governance issue, off-chain governance issue, is a whole different question.
I would like maybe also to add here that we have seen now with the, we are talking lately also about different generations of blockchain, and we talked tonight about smart contracts, because this is one of the most powerful tools, combination of smart contracts and blockchain, but this is not the end of the story. So yes, many of us love Ethereum a lot, but this is not going to be the only blockchain and the only platform and the latest one. So some of the issues of shortcomings Ethereum may have today is going to be addressed by other technology projects. And that's why we look into some interesting projects on a global scale, because it doesn't need to be from Europe or from the West to be an interesting new platform, a new blockchain platform, a new set of tools. And also picking up another topic which so in a nutshell, it's, I believe, just too short for a regulation of the blockchain space, because we are still in a process of forming the different components to set up basically the entire potential. And we talk a lot about smart contracts. Of course, this is a topic of the evening. But if I look at one of the questions we had earlier about the dispute resolution, then there are also some other interesting digital contracts, which are maybe even more focusing on the potential digital automated conflict resolution. These are the Ricardian contracts. And while all eyes are on Ethereum and the smart contracts, there's still one team who, in the background, was developing their platform called Open Bazaar, which aim is to basically decentralize e-commerce. And one of the guys of that team has, back in time, decided to go for Ricardian contracts to propose a digital framework for conflict or dispute resolution. And it's quite easy. So it's much easier than the smart contracts to implement. It has less power, but because it's so little complex, it's I think powerful, and it's basically both parties settle at the front before they transact on one role, whether it's a person or a body who is being contacted in case of a conflict. And I think this is quite nice. This is, for example, also responding to the question before, this could be a place where a lawyer, of course, or law office can come in and present their help in conflict resolution.
I have one question regarding the people who are not online and not use computers. The German government yearly issues a report on poverty, and they say that 20% of the population, not just children and old people and disabled people, who are not able to use computers, they're not stupid, they have a normal IQ, they don't use them, they will not use them. The German government thinks that's not going to change in the foreseeable future. 1/5 of the population is currently excluded from many things anyhow, but currently we still have a governance system that operates on paper or is just talking to people. Are we just leaving these people behind and they can, I don't know, die because they're not using computers? I mean, what's going to happen with them? Will we have intermediaries? It's a huge part of the population. I'm just throwing it out here. That's probably not going to change. What about them?
That's a very good question. Do you know, are you talking about computers? I don't know the study, or mobile phones?
Everything.
Okay.
Everything, not using technology.
But the young population, or I mean, if people over the age of 50, 60 are not using computers?
No, they're saying
across society.
20% are going to stay in place. It's not going to die out because it's just old people.
Okay.
It's young people too, and they're not disabled people.
There is a comment. Do you have a comment back there to that? Oh, okay. That is a serious issue. So digital inclusion. So access to internet and computers should be like a fundamental human right. in the digital world. So I think we need to talk about that. When we talk, one of my biggest issues is we live in a digital age. Yeah. Please, let's not talk about digital transformation anymore. It's already here, right? So, but we need to maybe redefine the concept of the fundamental human rights in the digital age. What does access, equal access? So we need to redefine the equal access to computer and internet, and I believe that in most jurisdictions that has, or many jurisdictions, that has already been done. But apparently there is a gap between the theoretical right and the reality. But another question is also, how do we define privacy in a digital age? And that's very tightly linked to the question you posed before, because if we don't, blockchain is a powerful tool, so we need to design it in a way where we have privacy by design inbuilt into the mechanism, where the blockchain can auto-enforce whatever it needs to auto-enforce without breaching the right to privacy. We need to have these discussions. Luckily, there are a lot of startups really also working on privacy-centric blockchains, on privacy-centric identity solutions, but we need to have this discussion more. Luckily, in Europe, we do have it. We're seeing that in America, privacy is defined differently, and in China, it's yet again defined differently. But then again, people hopefully will be more mobile and can choose jurisdictions in the future.
And we are moving away from a device world, right? So we will get more and more into a device-less world. That's at least my impression when you talk to developers. You know, having a device that you know, hold in your hands and use will not be necessary anymore in the future. And that will be, as I understand, mainly over voice control. So maybe those new technologies will also be able to catch those 20% of non-users at that point in time.
I found that not even that bad. Only 20%? So if you look on an international scale, I think the numbers are different. So I think it's not even that bad. Also, if we take in consideration that, look how easy knowledge is accessible today. It's really, you don't need to have money to get a book. You don't need to have money or support maybe to make something out of your life. And still people are, you know, choosing on a daily basis that they do not care about knowing, do not care about learning, do not care about preparing. So I think 20% is quite positive for the moment.
Yeah.
So my name is Franz von Weizsäcker. I'm heading the blockchain lab of the GIZ, the German Organization for International Development. So we're looking at a number of promising use cases in the field, which range from like land registries for the country of Georgia, or maybe self-sovereign identity is very promising if you look at the current situation, migration and refugees, and trade policy could be implemented as smart contracts, so there's some visionary ideas around. But then we come across a lot of ideas where we have our doubts, and so I would like to ask the panel, which aspects of life do you think are least likely to be governed on a blockchain in the foreseeable future? Maybe one little advertising here, we are hiring, so look on our website on giz.de.
Hiring lawyers or?
Economists, lawyers, basically people who are deep down the rabbit hole of the blockchain world.
Yeah, I just accepted. So your question was if there is anything that won't be governed on the blockchain.
In the foreseeable future, we don't know what's happening. AI takes in.
Well, first of all, I would maybe like to refer to the fact that maybe we should stop talking about blockchains and stop talking about crypto governance, because we're already what Bitcoin and the technology behind it, blockchain, started, is really a revolution of new systems that enable us to govern ourselves in a distributed way by combining cryptography and with distributed networks and maybe powered by game theory, but it doesn't need a blockchain. So I think it's hard to change terms. Everybody got used to blockchain, but we already see IOTA and other projects that are non-blockchain crypto projects. So blockchain, really the fundamental game-changing aspect of blockchain technology is that the crypto economics, the incentive mechanisms now allow a distributed governance, an unstoppable machine if you run the code forever, right? So it's about crypto governance, yes. And to answer your question, I think everything can be, in the long term, can be governed in theory by those systems. However, what Tom said before, we will never eradicate human conflict and misunderstanding. So it's just a tool to make life easier and to reduce bureaucracy and to help us organize ourselves across national boundaries and organize a disparate set of people who do not know and trust each other over national jurisdictions. But it will not, eradicate human conflict, or it will not eradicate probably people's need to meet each other in real life or in the virtual reality.
Just a very brief question that ties directly into that. I wonder if that also applies for privacy. If I look at the fact that the blockchain is an immutable record and never forgets anything, I wonder if there's anything related to privacy that should probably never end up on a blockchain. Is there anything you could think of spontaneously what that might be?
Oh, there are many, many things that should never end up on a blockchain. First of all, because it's computationally really expensive, and also you don't want it out in the open. So basically what you put on the blockchain is hashes. So basically you calculate the hash of the data you want to be able to prove that you had at a certain point in time, and you put it on the blockchain. You don't actually, I think that's a common misunderstanding. You don't actually put data on the blockchain. I had an answer to your question, actually. So basically blockchain, it's a way of making the execution of mechanisms easier. It's not a replacement for values or value discussion. So basically it's a base technology, it's a really potent technology, but it's a technology. So I think there are many, many things that a technology cannot replace.
However, the intersection of blockchain and AI might pose in new interesting avenues. But yes, artificial intelligence is not quite there yet. But I think when we talk about blockchain today and the socio-economic, jurisdictional implications, we always have to talk about this technology in intersection with all the other emerging technologies like AI and IoT. And the intersection, the convergence of these technologies will be very powerful. And I think that all these technologies have not reached their inflection point yet. And they might reach their inflection point in the next 7 to 10 years. And when they do, we will live in a very, very different world. And I think we cannot fathom the type of world we will live in a few years.
Yeah, I'd say at some points we are even going to see that convergence happening faster. So what should not be there? And I have a personal feeling that emotionally the blockchain is possibly going to be too powerful. And if I look at the convergence, which Shermin, you were talking about, we see a lot of artificial intelligence and IoT in it, but we should also look into genetics into it. And I think blockchain and genetics is a perfect fit because you have a high level of data, which is very relevant, which you can secure, you can identify, and you can give access to. And if I look at the recent developments, for example, you have all probably seen the two little nice twin clone monkeys lately. Then I'd say the combination of these technologies in reproduction and genetic improvement are going to be also in context of CRISPR, which is do-it-yourself, just in a slopey way of saying it, do-it-yourself genetic technology. Here we should really look that have an eye on it, that it's not going to be misused, you know.
So how are we doing with the time? I think we can still take two or three more questions, right, before we wrap it up.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Philip. I once studied electrical engineering, now studying computer science. And once I lived in a student apartment building, and in the evening with some beer, I talked with my friends about how to set up a media server on a Raspberry Pi, or how to use CRISPR-Cas9 at home, or things like that. But I was never able to talk to them how, for example, prevent entering a contract when entering a train, and because they just didn't knew what's all around it. I think you all, or the most of you, know what I mean. And yeah, the problem I saw and the problem I expect to run into is that we are getting so specialized that we don't know what's going around us and don't have enough knowledge to understand the other worlds. Like the engineering guys are not understanding the law guys, and the law guys are not understanding the engineering guys, and so things like the computer science people create their own law system, like Thor network or their own cryptocurrency, just because they don't know how to handle it with laws. And yeah, my question is, do you think that that education must get a little bit brighter to give everyone understanding of the other science?
I'm not sure I understand the question. So was the question, were you implying that we're creating our own currencies because we don't know how to use the existing ones?
Yeah, no, it's like that's what I'm, as a computer science person, able to do. So there I'm good in creating computer science stuff. And so, like, what's the best example? Like, I'm frightened about someone can steal my data. And so I start heavy encryption. And lawyers could be able to just sue someone because he steals data. And the computer science people are frightened about suing someone because they don't know how to do it. And the law people are not going to encrypt their whole data and every data stream on their computer because they just don't know how to do it. And yeah, that's what I meant. I hope you understand.
I fully understand you, because that's the reality which must make it problematic for blockchain projects to be implemented in large corporations, where you have collective decision takings and where you have these different professions and people living in their specific field of expertise and having not an interdisciplinary skill set usually. So I think besides the cooperation, a very important role in that aspect are novelists who are able to write in form of screenplays or in form from stories, some narratives where you can understand independently from where you're coming from, whether you're an economist, you're an IT guy, or you're a creative guy, what a certain type of technology development means. So what helped me a lot, for example, to communicate with people not from my background back in the first wave of the internet was the novels being created by Neil Stephenson in many ways, or William Gibson, Bruce Sterling, and here for the blockchain space, I think one should mention Daniel Suarez, where you see, and where everyone can basically read it and understand how things are being tied together.
But however, I think a point you made is very valid. We need more interdisciplinary teaching, and IT is not a department anymore. It's the base layer of everything, right? So I think in every discipline that we're learning, whether we're teaching medicine or law or whatever, or economics, we need to teach coding and the notion of coding and I think it's a psychological barrier. And this is why teaching coding at a kindergarten level is very important. It takes the psychological barrier away and people will start to experiment with code. And we should lobby for that much more. Otherwise, our societies will be having problems because as long as we don't have self-coding AI that codes, we will need people who code, and we don't have enough of them, and yeah.
You should say, Ela, that this is the end of the discussion, and then the last word is given to me. Thank you very much for doing that. The applause should go to the panelists. It was a wonderful, wonderful, excellent communication. It was actually a communication also, thanks to all of you who participated and who were here. But before I do that, I have to say one more word because I've forgotten that in the beginning. Namely that the entire thing here is sponsored by CMS, which is a law firm. For those who are not lawyers, it's a quite prominent law firm. But apart from that, having said this and expressed our gratitude, it's now my turn to thank you all. It was fantastic. As I said, it was really enlightening. It was great discussion. And I'm leaving this room enriched. And that means that we are now stepping out after a huge round of applause to them. And in gratitude, they will get a little gift from me while you are applauding. Thank you very much.